get it for you. But like some of the intro I wrote, this show was a lot like Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. It's a journey through time and space. A big journey through time and space today, because we're going to be taking you to some pretty far off and funky places like Neuschwabenland in Antarctica. So of course that channel, the one and only, is here for you. It's a very difficult thing we have to do sometimes because there is interference, a lot of interference, and of course the interferers don't leave lecture notes on how we're supposed to overcome the interference. We just do the best we can with what we've got and try to overcome it. That's what it's all about. So we're going to do a recorded show like we did last week and do our best. It'll still be there for you. In a way, we just like raise the drawbridge, keep the monsters out, come out of left field, whack them in the back of the head with a salami, and continue with what we want to do. That's very important. As a little aside, one of the things I wanted to bring up is, you know, as major news stories that go on, so many we could probably come here every night and still never be bored. But one of the stories in Afghanistan, of course, is the idiots who burn the Quran and get everybody all upset so that we have some sort of massive jihad going on against soldiers, and a lot of people getting killed for nothing because some idiot insulted Islam. And you just have to wonder, like, you know, what's in your head? Because even if you thought you were doing something in whatever bizarre notion that you thought was right, you just unleash the power of unintended consequences to kill your buddies. Because you know that people are going to get very upset by this, and they're going to get very violent, and they're going to kill a lot of good, decent Americans who should never have died. The war's almost over. They could go home and live, be with their families, but because of a moron or two or three, this happens. But you know, one of the things we can implore people of any faith, especially those that the Muslims respect Jesus as a prophet, listen to what he said. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're just a bunch of idiots. Don't react to the idiots. But in a way, you just see this as a massive CIA plot so that they could just keep it going and get it started and never let this never-ending war end. That's what it's all about for them. Death, destruction, mayhem. They don't hold anything good or decent. But one of the most important things you have to be able to try to do is practice forgiveness for trespasses. That's supposed to be what it's all about. But in the Santa Claus Christian nation that we primarily are, of course, that doesn't happen. We just have to jihad and jihad and jihad. So you wonder sometimes, who's the extremist? You're an extremist because you can't afford fighter planes and bombers and have your own country to do it from? Or you're an extremist because you're resisting people who have bombers and fighter planes and come from another country to do it from? It's a very, very interesting word. The results are always the same. So of course we did have a major Google Doodle come up again. Front page news. Easy one to see through for me for some strange reason. But it was a Google Doodle about a famous scientist, Heinrich Rudolf Hertz. And we see the undulating wave across the screen. So for most people that's just, you know, a cute little thing. You look at it, turn it off, laugh and giggle. Some of the news articles said, well, the colors make the Google Doodle because they're the colors of the Google letters that are usually on the face page. And that's like the infantile beginning way to look at this. But it's a much deeper, deeper, deeper code. And when we talk about where it's going to take us, we're going very deep. Just to look at it just in its form, we have wave motions with a line through the middle and the oscillations going above and below. Above and below what? So one of the things that instantly kicks into me, because we've been dealing a lot with Antarctica, and I know that Steve Allen, or pardon me, Mr. Allen from Google has made a tremendous exploration into the Antarctic with his super yacht Octopus and a submarine. So I already know that's a major place for them to go. But one of the classic words from scriptures, Genesis 1:6-8, God said, the firmament be made in the midst of the waters, and part the waters from the waters. So what waters are we parting from? And God made the firmament and parted the waters that were under the firmament from the waters that were above the firmament. and it was done. So of course the scientists are looking for water under Antarctica, freshwater lakes like Lake Vostok and many other bodies of water, water under a firmament. And of course the oceans around Antarctica, the continent, are waters above the firmament. So we have waters separated from waters, just like it says. And then in wave motion, you have waves or waves of water separated from each other in this wave motion. Very clear to me, very difficult to see for many other people. But there's several levels in these codes. And that's what makes them more complicated and more fun. One of the pictures in the press, Turkish press, that accompanied the doodle was this picture of Heinrich Hertz at work. And instantly what I see, of course, is that white cross in the background. And that white cross, to me, looks like the constellation, the Southern Cross. A constellation that was visible in biblical times on the horizon, but because of the Earth shifting over thousands of years, it's now not visible north of the 25-degree line. So it's something that is just very special in the southern sky. So I see that unseen thing, the Southern Cross. Mr. Hertz was very popular for making all sorts of inventions that never really got anywhere, but ultimately turned into radar, TV, radio. Waves are just the ultimate thing in the modern world. In his day, his experiments brought on the unseen, various types of light, electricity, and magnetism. He did experiments that prove that these waves exist. And then we see this Southern Cross. When it's looked at from Antarctica, of course, the Southern Cross is off to the left. Here, the crux, C-R-U-X. And when we follow, because it's his 155th birthday, if we go along in the general direction of 155, we come across a constellation called Eridanus. That's a very interesting constellation. Other big things, of course, are the coal box, the biggest nebula, or one of the biggest nebulas you can see with your unaided eye. Antarctica is known for its coal deposits. It's a giant coal box. Then there's another group of stars called the jewel box, and they're just an undulating form of lights of every description, almost like all the multicolors you see in the wave motion of the Google Doodle. Anyway, the Coal Sack Nebula is 550 light years away, so we still have this reference to 55, 155, 55. These are some of the things I see in this. But when we look at this other constellation, the Eridanus, it's a reference to the Po River in Italy, a long and tortuous path of a river, like a long and tortuous path to get through the firmaments to the water below. Eridu was an ancient Babylonian city sacred to the god of the abyss, a freshwater reservoir under the Earth's surface. Freshwater reservoir under the Earth's surface. Sounds like Lake Vostok and all these other types of freshwater bodies under Antarctica. In the myth, Phaeton took control of his father Helios' chariot, and he lost control, burning heaven and earth. Zeus struck him dead with a thunderbolt, and he crashed upon the earth. This constellation is also sometimes termed as the Route of the Souls. Eridanos was Greek for the name Po. There's also a super void out there as well. It's devoid of galaxies. It's just absolutely enormous, about 1 billion light years across. There's speculation that this void may be due to a quantum entanglement between our universe and another, just like the ice on Antarctica is an entanglement between the waters above and the waters below. In that picture, we also saw Mr. Hertz tapping a message on his Morse key or telegraph key. We see coiled wires that just imply a great flux, like you have a great flux of electromagnetism coming into the South Pole. And what would we be tapping? As we talked about in previous shows, the WOW signal, 1420 megahertz. That's the signal that came from space that was picked up in 1977. A full, complete signal, one we're not supposed to transmit on because maybe that's the ET call home number. And then we find out that Hertz is the nickname of the commanding officer of the 13th Expeditionary Support Squadron Task Force Support Forces Antarctica McMurdo Station, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Hertz Vaughn. And then, of course, we're told that there's UFO bases and secret portals down there. So that's our commanding officer with the Pacific Air Forces. His website was kind of hacked up a little bit when we found this. It's restored itself. I guess the CIA said we were watching and they fixed it up a little bit. But one thing we did find on one of the End Times websites was comments from Admiral Byrd. Admiral Byrd was in the 1947 attack on Antarctica with the task force that we've talked about in previous shows. We have video from the original expedition on the website conspiracy-cafe.com that you can look at and look at some of this original footage and realize, of course, it's just a propaganda film to show you the warm and fuzzies and not get into the details. The details of what Admiral Byrd saw were phenomenal. His life was ended very, very shortly after he finished recording these details. In 1956, he died in 1957, a mysterious death. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal was committed to a mental hospital, suicided as he was thrown out the window of the presidential suite in Bethesda Naval Hospital. He knew things. Byrd knew things. If this is an accurate rendition of what Byrd saw, then we know exactly what we're dealing with. And I think we saw that in the movie Neuschwabenland, that little bit of antiquated film we have on the website. It just shows pictures from Nazi Germany going into a deep, dark Antarctica. We've copied a lot of the pictures and put English translations on Neuschwabenland so that you can read exactly what those film clips say. We have a very wonderful translation from one of our fans in Germany. So Admiral Byrd said he had to write a diary in secrecy and obscurity about what happened. You see in the movie when his plane is separated from the other two planes and he comes back quite late, back in February of 1947. So he says, there comes a time when the rationality of men must fade into insignificance and one must accept the inevitability of truth. I am not at liberty to disclose the following documentation at this writing. Perhaps it shall never see the light of public scrutiny. But I must do my duty and record here for all to read one day in a world of greed and exploitation, a certain of mankind can no longer express, which is the truth. So his flight log from February 19th, 1947, 09:10 hours, he talks about vast snow and ice, coloration of the snow changing to yellowish, and then reddish and purple. Also something in the Google Doodle, those changes of colors. 09:10 hours, both magnetic and gyro compasses beginning to gyrate and wobble. Unable to hold a heading. Controls are seemingly slow to respond, very sluggish. 09:15, in the distance he sees mountains. A small range that I have never seen before. 09:55, he talks about strong turbulence. 10 o'clock, beyond the range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There's something definitely wrong and abnormal here. To the port side, there are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. There's a valley below. It is green with either moss or a type of tight-knit grass. Light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. There's a large animal beneath us. First he thought it was an elephant, and then he says it's a mammoth. The external temperature is 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Navigation instruments seem normal, but the radio is not functioning. At 11:30, he sees a spot which he recognizes as a city. The aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. A strange kind of aircraft is closing rapidly. It's dish-shaped, radiant quality. It has markings on them, like a swastika. We are caught in an invisible vice grip force of some type. So he did say that when he came out. He was talking to the Chilean press, and he did say that there were dish-shaped aircraft down there that could travel from pole to pole in minutes. And he was very worried and very upset, and he said that America had to prepare itself to defend itself from forces of that nature. So that jives with what this diary, which we cannot prove is true or not because dead men tell no tales. At 11:35 hours, a voice, Nordic or Germanic in accent, welcomed him. The engines of the plane stopped running in descent, as though it was caught in some great unseen elevator. When it landed, they were approached by tall men, blonde hair. It was a simmering city pulsating with hues of color. It seemed to be made of a crystal material. He was taken to a room with beautiful colorations, and he was told by the person he was led to, the take me to your leader type, we have let you enter here because you are of a noble character and well known in the surface world. And he gasped, surface world? You are in the domain of Ariane, the inner world of the earth. Our interest rightly begins just after you exploded the first nuclear weapons over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We sent our flying machines, the Flugelrans, and those are well documented and shown all over the internet. Flying saucers with iron crosses on them and swastikas. We've never interfered before in your wars, the barbarity, but now we must. You have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, and they are not heeded. Our culture and science is many thousand years beyond yours. Your race has reached the point of no return. For those among you who would destroy the very world rather than relinquish their powers. In 1945 and afterward, we tried to contact your race, but our efforts were met with hostility. Our Flugel rods were fired upon. Just remember, too, that Roswell happened in 48, I believe. Did we shoot one of them down? There is a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will not spend itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. Your recent war was only a prelude of what will come for your race. We are here to see it more clearly with each hour. Some of your race will live through the storm. A new world stirring from the ruins, seeking its lost and legendary treasures. They will be here. We shall come forward and help revive your culture and your race. Perhaps by then you will have learned futility of war and its strife. Certain of your culture and science will be returned for your race. Return to the surface world with this message. And of course, he did. An unseen force lifted his aircraft to an altitude of 2,700 feet, guiding us on the return way. The airspeed indicator registered nothing. And then 27 minutes later, they're away from the vast reaches of that place back to the ice and snow. March 11th, 1947, he goes back to his log. There was a staff meeting at the Pentagon. The president has been advised. He was detained for 6 hours and 39 minutes, to be exact, he says, placed under strict control under national security provisions in order to remain silent. He says, I've kept those provisions faithful, but he says, I have to speak. There's a moral right that this secret not die with me. So he wrote a diary on the 30th of December, 1956. I have done my duty towards the monstrous military-industrial complex. The long night begins to approach. So he did talk about mountains. There's a little picture of Admiral Byrd here hunkering down in the Arctic, just to give us some idea of how rough it is on our side down there. And then the National Science Foundation has just put up some articles about mountain ranges that they're just explaining now. The Gamburtsev subglacial mountains. Are these the ones he flew over? I'm not too sure, but it just seemed kind of ironic. And this was a picture I've used before when talking about the firmaments some time ago, and maybe even another show on this network. But you just see a man peeking through the firmament, through the looking glass to the other dimension, to the other side. It's a classic painting from 1888, the Flammarion engraving. And it's just an amazing little piece. So we wonder, again, did they kill Forrestal? Did they kill Admiral Byrd Sir Francis Bacon wrote the New Atlantis many, many centuries before. And then, of course, we have the infamous wow signal linked to the article, too, that a new book has come out about. Some very, very interesting times. Of course, that's just all conspiracy, isn't it? They always tell us anytime we're near the truth, it's a conspiracy. When the world was flat, the conspiracy was the world was round, because the elite rich knew the world was round, and they wouldn't tell us because they can profit from this. So we have to think, is the story of the inner earth true, and they're just not telling us so they can profit, so they can have advantage over the common man? That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. So something I did way back in 2007 is I learned about Paul Allen from Microsoft having a super yacht called Octopus with a submarine going on a journey to Antarctica with former Navy SEALs as bodyguards, protectors. And just like Admiral Byrd going to Antarctica, you just wonder, like, what do you need all these SEALs to protect yourself from? Protect yourself from what? The penguins? No. Probably something far more advanced. But this is one of the submarines here. This is made by a company called U.S. Subs. And it's the high end of luxury yachts for the elite rich. They've made about 100 for the mega billionaires. Oh, 100. So if you're into yachting magazines, you can come across some of this. This is where I've come across some of these things. This is the original map of Admiral Byrd's attack on Antarctica from 3 fronts with his naval task forces as he goes to Neuschwabenland. And as we get to the end of the movie, we find out, this is the movie Neuschwabenland on the website, that the last clip mentions Base 211 to accommodate 5,000 personnel. The Germans were very keen on having 5,000 personnel in Antarctica. And that's just at the beginning. This document was captured by the Russians at the end of the war. It's circulating around the internet. It shows the firmaments, the subglacial lakes, some other close-up maps that we'll get into. This map was made in 1946 by National Geographic cartographer Heinrich C. Buran. And of course, it was National Geographic Explorer that Al Gore was on recently, going to Antarctica as well. Everybody seems to have been down there. The Crown Prince of England is in the Falkland Islands, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Antarctica as well. And these were the maps the Germans put together of this water below the firmament. So Neuschwabenland is the tip of Antarctica, and they say that there was a means or a way to get inside. We cannot confirm or deny that, but that's one of the big secrets that no one's supposed to know anything about. This is the 1938 German expedition down there. Everybody's all happy and smiley because they know something we don't. We have links on the website about a British mission after the war where they went down there to seal the access points and prevent these inner earth beings from getting out. There was also reports in some of these far out articles in Nexus magazine that we even used 3 nuclear weapons to seize these places. This is a photograph of Octopus. It looks like something out of a James Bond movie. It's quite the luxury yacht. Has a $20 million annual budget. It opens up in the back. It can house a great deal of material in here, and it can release a submarine. Whether it's this submarine from this article here, Super Yachts and CEOs. They mention Octopus in the article. The insides are very, very comfortable. You don't suffer in there like you do in these old ones. Bloomberg had an article, Seafaring Super Rich Dive to the Ocean Bottom in Luxury Submarine, specifically mentioned Paul Allen and going to the Antarctic. And of course, Mr. Allen is very, very particular to the submarine company, warning the boat builder that loose lips sink ships. Another purchaser of these submarines was Russian oil billionaire Roman Abramovich, owner of the Chelsea Football Club. And there's a picture of a boat in the back of Octopus. This $80 million sub seems a little more useful for research purposes. It also holds a little mini sub that can be released from inside as well. That's some little bit for your money. So what's with all the secret societies, the elite rich? What are they up to? As we say there, probably everything and more. Of course, we're not allowed to know about these things because we're the elite poor. And we just have to struggle with what we have. There was an interesting clip that came up of a UFO, and I guess we can play that. They say it's Roswell, but it may very well not be. We don't exactly know where it is. Let's see if this puppy will start on me here. So that was quite the little tour around the universe. Another story came up too where there was supposed to be a UFO in South Carolina. Then it was written off as a bolide, some type of meteorite that exploded and crashed down. That was last week. Very interesting stills there. We also had another one, I was told by friends at work, that we had the same thing happen in Saskatchewan. See if we can get this puppy going too on us. Assange was saying in 2004 that we were at war with these people that were living below in Neuschwabenland or whatever it is or was. We can't confirm or deny that, but that's one of the reasons they say they really went after him. It makes a lot of sense, really. One thing we are good at, all of us together, is we form a band of people, and we thank one of our viewers for sending in a contribution that's greatly helped and appreciated, because there is a war. I call this almost like World Cyber War I, because the powers that be are working overtime to disconnect us from the internet. And of course, we have on our blog posted the story about the FBI pulling the plug on the internet. This was a nice little image to give it some meat. But security slackers risk internet blackout March 8th as the FBI disconnects. They're worried about some Trojan called DNS changer, and they want to unplug legitimate DNS servers and replace the rogue DNS servers that are forwarding victims to malicious sites. Seems all very noble, and it sounds to me like a good cover story, which you can read in detail on the website, conspiracy-cafe.com. I look at it as one of those cover stories that you use, and I would say that would probably be a very good day to start a war. March 8th or March 7th. That would be one to worry very much about the false flag coming off and getting this thing with Iran really going. One of our fans has already clicked in very, very properly and told us that that is also a religious holiday, not being of the Jewish faith. I don't celebrate that day and never really heard about it too much, but it's called Purim, P-U-R-I-M. That's March 8th. And some of the people who understand that and understand the great history that goes back to Esther and an attempted massacre of the Jewish race and how they retaliated and had a very big success, I guess, in getting rid of the people that wanted to kill them. It's a very, very important day. Usually you dress up and celebrate. But on a previous one, a certain president by the name of Bush started a certain war. What a way to celebrate. And they may be trying to do that again on the same day. So there's also a full moon that day, as I recall from looking at the calendar. So it seems to fit many, many purposes that we could be up to things. Lots of things. We talked about Bill C-30 here in our country, about how our conservative government, which is just basically a vassal government for the shadow government, the New World Order, wants to spy on us from every direction. They want all our emails, all our telephone calls. They even want to get the little chat boxes on video games. They want to know everything, keep it and store it, and then store it with a private company, so of course that can be hacked and accessed by other people. That was one of the big reasons why they wanted to get rid of the gun registry, because the data couldn't be secure. It could be hacked and taken over, and here they want to do exactly the same thing. But I look at it as they made a trade with the police to say, you back off on the gun registry and we'll do something worse. And that'll be your payback for shutting up, sitting at the back of the bus. Only makes sense. The British want to do the same thing. Government spy program will monitor every phone call, text, and email. Details will be kept for up to a year. Be stored again by a private company, and they'll know anything and everything about you. It's going to be called the Communications Capabilities Development Program. The Queen will advise about that in her speech from the throne in May. A chap here from Big Brother Watch says, how many parents know that a simple mobile phone game will give someone the ability to access their children's location, see what their camera lens is looking at, or see the phone number of who is calling their child? Well, one person we know who's on the short list is Rupert Murdoch and his henchmen from his various news organizations. So when you take on these apps and you agree to the circumstances, in many cases, they did a survey in England on them of 200 apps available. 170, you give away your soul. You don't know it because you don't read the contract. Because we need the technology, we have to be able to work with it. But what we get is screwed. Hacking group Anonymous says it could shut down the entire U.S. power grid. National security warrants. Computer hackers could have the ability to take down the entire U.S. electrical grid within the next 2 years, National Security Agency General Keith Alexander says in his report to Congress. Then he adds the codicil. They could bring about a limited national power outage through a cyber attack. Cyber attacks represent an increasing risk for the United States government. Ongoing determination from hacker groups to expose institutional corruption, and he now believes Anonymous is moving towards more disruptive direction. The U.S. government is trying to discredit them, Anonymous says. Ridiculous. I have to agree with them. Why would Anonymous shut the power grid down? It makes no sense. They just want to make you feel afraid to just ratchet up this power so they can have more with scarerism as a tactic. Anonymous announced Operation Global Blackout, a plan to shut down the internet March 31st. Security experts, however, rate the group's chances of taking the web offline as minimal. So I never heard about that one before. So the White House wants to make cybersecurity a top priority. Of course, Anonymous has done noble things by going after some of these crappers, exposing their lies, their corruptions, their falsehoods, police abuses, financial abuses, abuses of power. It's hardly something that you should be chastised for. You should be given a medal. Social media tactical intelligence collection. Spying and propaganda using Facebook and Twitter. The Mediterranean Council for Intelligence Studies, MCIS, yearbook says social media, the new cutting edge in open source tactical intelligence collection. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, increasingly viewed by intelligence agencies as invaluable channels of information acquisition. The use of social media by intelligence agencies for other purposes. An intelligence gathering tool. Using propaganda to create fake identities in support of covert operations is how they use it. An army of fake social media friends to promote propaganda. Social media, Air Force ordered software to manage army of fake virtual people. Pentagon seeks to manipulate social media for propaganda purposes. So basically this is all turning into a giant crap hole. Something I don't use much anymore is Facebook. And I think we should get away from this YouTube completely because it just spies on you, as we know from having a show and just putting a short clip of a song in there that we're not selling or profiting from. Just using it for a political comment, which should be fair territory. YouTube spies on us and tells us we can't have our show on YouTube. So we're not going to have a song tonight. But we mentioned to the boys that there are alternatives to YouTube. And we probably don't have all that spy shit in there looking through our windows. So they're going to have a CIA-linked cyber dissidents meeting with Freedom House. Now, that seems to be an oxymoron. It's called the Conference on Cyber Dissidents, Global Successes and Challenges. So basically what we see are the so-called free and democratic countries mirroring countries like China, Cuba, Iran, Syria, and Russia, accumulating more power like Venezuela and Colombia to look after people making legitimate comments or doing legitimate things, everybody being treated as a spy, as a problem. One of the funny things in one of the start articles on all this from this chap who is probably some kind of mouthpiece for the intelligence agencies anyway, but Sasha Fall, or Sorsha Fall, at the beginning, at the end of his article on this, he talked about 6,509 people protesting against the Obama regime. 65, 11, and 9, 9, 11 backwards in reverse. It's almost like he's got a code in his article. One very good piece that we came across, it's not too often I find somebody that you know, you can really like. It was in the Daily Bell, a chap by the name of Anthony Weil. Yes, the war for the internet has begun. He talks about this Kim.com being arrested, and then all of a sudden this massive interest in stolen copyrighted entertainment for no royalties that have been paid out. This is one of the first phases in the internet war. The great internet wars have begun that weekend. Human history will never be the same. The power elite seeks to control and constrain the internet, and yet may end up taking a step back, at least in the early rounds anyway. The directed history of the Anglosphere power elite has been so clever in inculcating over the past century, and it is gradually fading away. The elites practiced directed history through the 20th century, setting up wars and economic catastrophes designed to consolidate world government. With so many understanding and evaluating the mechanisms of the elites, this is considerably harder to pull off. Elites have actually a limited playbook. Fear-based promotions, they are designed to frighten the middle classes into giving up wealth and power to specially prepared global institutions like the UN, the IMF, etc. The toolkit may include war, pervasive societal matrix, and socio-political, economic, religious, and military elements. So one of the big ones he gets into that we saw through right away, of course, is the global warming fraud, creating the carbon currency, carbon taxes, and all this sort of thing. They use the control of the scientific establishment to proclaim a phony hypothesis, planted, specially placed scientists at a critical point to further control the dialogue. It doesn't take very many people to control a given conversation or promote a certain campaign. The elites could virtually create a scientific consensus where none existed. The elite-controlled media was turned loose to trumpet these supposed findings. Elite-controlled UN agencies created white papers that could be called calls for action. The white papers were in turn picked up by elite-funded NGOs to form a full-fledged socio-political campaigns to crack down on global warming polluters. And we fell for it. Of course, we needed legislation to control the global warming. And then that takes a phenomenal amount of money, but they control more than 100 central banks. And anything we have to say goes into a vast echo chamber. There is a scientific consensus that then creates news for the media and galvanizes action because they do control the media. And with this consensus, they turn it around on us and keep us enslaved. Every part of this painstakingly created matrix has been virtually shattered in the 21st century. One avenue of communication the elites do not control is the internet. And what some of these hackers and activists have done is got into the email accounts of these global warming people to find out that this was the biggest scam, where we had written documentary evidence to prove the case. Of course, mainstream media doesn't really take that like a severed head to the pinnacle of the mountain to say justice. But the internet has to be destroyed by these elites, or at least controlled as soon as possible. Without control of the internet, tens of trillions of dollars that they sink into this crap, a vast matrix of scientists, academics, media moguls, corporate, military, and religious chief is rendered virtually useless. And he ties the parallels to this to the exact parallels of the Gutenberg press. That's the old printing press. Because they used the same thing back then. Copyright. Internet piracy, who are the thieves? Copyright laws were developed hundreds of years ago to counteract the spread of information in books and the invention of the Gutenberg press. The same tactics that are applied then are being applied now. War, authoritarian legislation, copyright infringement are all tools of this particular elite that we have been saddled with. The one world conspiracy uses a limited toolkit. It is not easy to control millions and billions of people. War is perhaps the most useful tool. After the advent of the Gutenberg press, wars like the so-called Peasant War spread across the whole of Europe and Britain. And I don't remember in school ever being taught about the Peasant War, because I guess they don't want us to repeat that. But it just seems to be a logical denouement that if we can't talk it out, we're going to have to fight it out. It's one of those Georgisms. It's just a fact of life. So that's why in the past, all sides agreed to free speech, because it's a lot easier to talk it out and a whole lot worse to fight it out. So we see also with this, we used to have what he used to call here, it's almost funny, this privatized Western justice, where you were your own sheriff, your own marshal. Private justice was honored. Tradition, duels, vendettas, and other forms of private justice interaction were developed to use to get justice. Didn't necessarily have to mean violence. Sometimes the threat of violence was enough to get some sort of civil action remedied. Put a knife up to your throat and say, hey, you poisoned my well and you killed my children. Oh, okay, I'll make amends. It's tough for lawyers and judges, I guess, to survive then, and politicians. So what the elite rich have done, according to this, they built vast gulags through the 20th century that would have been thought insane in societies past. These societies did not have the advantage of central banking and the ability to print money from nothing. So I have to say, when I look at this, it's just a brilliant article from end to end. And he goes into Mr. .com. And you said they made a law out of nothing. Because basically, he's responsible for what the end user does with the copyrighted material. And that doesn't happen in any other form of law with other companies being responsible for the end user. If you buy a lawnmower, the company John Deere isn't responsible for your abuse of the lawnmower. And then he looks at the comments from Hollywood. It's almost something like from a mafia don. And this is a quote from one of their spokesmen, Chris Dodd. This industry is watching very carefully what's going to stand up for, or who's going to stand up for them when their job is at stake. Don't ask me to write a check for you when you think your job is at risk, and then don't pay any attention to me when my job is at stake. I would caution people, don't make the assumption that because the, quote, Hollywood community has been historically supportive of Democrats, which we have, Don't make the false assumptions this year that because we did in the past years, we will do it again this year. These issues before us, this is the only issue that goes right to the heart of this industry. So he says they talk like a mafia don. If you do this, there's going to be consequences. Just flat out threatening them with loss of funds, loss of votes, loss of support for not backing them up on their plan. One of the really stupid things about it, especially when you get to some older things, like I could play a song that was popular maybe in my youth that no one's heard in 40 years. You don't even know it exists. But you give it a little bit of a shot in the arm and you play it again, and then new generations hear it and go, hey, I like that. And maybe it gets popular again and people will buy the music. So basically what we're doing for you is giving you free advertising. But you're so stupid, you'd rather keep your song locked up in its vault 6,000 feet underground so no one will ever hear it again. And it's just lost until some archivist maybe finds it somewhere. Absolutely stupid and ridiculous. But that's the way it is. C'est la guerre, as the French say. And speaking of c'est la guerre, we're ready. We can see the price of fuel going up. We're being warned here in Ontario and in Canada by our governments that we have to be prepared for record-breaking prices in April. So that tells us already that the Straits of Hormuz will be closed. While I was driving home, I came across a sign in the region of Peel, west of Toronto, from the government saying, be prepared for 7 days. So the federal government always had a disaster plan package for 3 days of preparedness. This one says your preparedness kit should be ready for 7 days. Big increase, not the typical advertising sign from the government, something to take very close heed of. Because Iran says they will take preventive measures, and I don't blame them. Any of these countries, you see a whole army coming around. The best defense is a good offense. If somebody's coming in to kick you in the shins, kick them first, and they can't kick you as hard. Because if you just sit back and let them blow up all your stuff on the ground, well, you shouldn't have bought it in the first place. Iran's going to unveil fresh military exercises. Most of it I look at is just hype. Greasing the wheels. U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency Director Lieutenant General Ronald Burgess told the U.S. Congress that Iran may launch missiles if attacked, but is unlikely to initiate or intentionally provoke a conflict. So here we go. We got two stories. We got the guy who works for a living saying they're not going to do it, and we got the media hyping it all up saying they're going to kick you, they're going to kick you, they're going to kick you. Good for oil futures, I'm quite sure of that. Ed Asner says, you know, Navy SEALs have been in communication with him, and they're not really going for this false flag stuff anymore. That would be nice. Then a lot of people hope that the generals are going to somehow come out of the closet and save the world. And in this editorial with about Ed Asner, it just says, like, generals don't do that. They're the ultimate whoremongers for the corporations to kill people and slaughter people as a career path. So they're not going to step up and do something good. The only good general is probably one that's been kicked out of the army, or, like I say about politicians, the only good one's got a bullet hole in him. If he survived, bonus. If he didn't, well, I guess that's the way it goes. In a famous poem, German poet Heinrich von Kleist, I wonder if that's any relation to Dave von Kleist, who used to be with the Power Hour, the military is a living monument to tyranny. And we have to agree with that, because what's your job description? Killing. Okay. What happens when you get promoted? Kill more and better. So that is true. I'm glad it's not something I believe in or am a part of. I believe in defending ourselves and that sort of thing, but to go out and, you know, basically stir the pot, cause trouble, goes completely against what we should be standing up for. U.S. admits Israel is arming, funding, and training terrorist groups in Iran. Now there's a good one. Deadly attacks on Iranian nuclear scientists. They're trained and armed by Israeli Secret Service, U.S. officials tell NBC News. Of course, they probably burned that clip. The People's Mujahideen of Iran has been designated as a terrorist group by the United States, accused of killing American servicemen and contractors in the 1970s, supporting the takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Iran. before breaking with the Iranian mullahs in 1980. 5 nuclear scientists have been killed since 2007. People's Mujahideen of Iran, known as MEK, MKO, and PMI, have been said to be trained, equipped by the Mossad. They even built a replica of the home of the nuclear scientists they killed prior to the attack in Israel. Iran gets this information from the interrogation of one of their terrorists caught in 2010. And that's the way the world works. One of the ways it could work is a lot better, because there is an alternative to nuclear energy that is nuclear. There's another element close to uranium, but not uranium. It's just a couple over on the periodic table of elements, called thorium. Thorium reacts just like uranium, and you can use it to run a fission reaction and have nuclear power. It's a lot better. Thorium sits 2 spots to the left of the uranium on this periodic table, has the same characteristics. It could fuel reactors. It's abundant in nature. It's more abundant than uranium. Produces less waste. It's less radioactive, and it generates more energy per ton. So why aren't we using it? Because it doesn't blow up. It doesn't make bombs. The whole reason we went into the nuclear program in the first place was to develop weapons. That's what we did it for. One of the other big things, China's making some huggy-kissy moves with Israel. They've had a little meeting, a little détente. And one of the things, of course, that set the stage for this is Israel has oil and gas. And China will be friends with anybody who's got oil and gas. So there's something called the Levant Basin in the eastern Mediterranean, encompassing 32,000 square miles. Offshore territory from, of course, the Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Cyprus. So I can see why people would want to have strategic control over that. 122 trillion cubic feet of recoverable gas, 1.7 billion barrels of recoverable oil. And this is just a little map of the string of pearls that China has to get to the Middle East. These are naval bases they've created called the String of Pearls, so that they can be ready to go and get it. These are pipelines that are going across China so that they can get the oil and gas home and make use of it. You see they end here at Iran. Another choke point. 2 of the biggest gas finds Israel has are the Leviathan and Tamar, 130 and 80 kilometers from the port of Haifa. One has 16 trillion cubic feet of gas, the other one has 8.4 trillion cubic feet of gas. That's always something to fight over. That just seems to be human nature. We fight over it all. And we have another big story. Of course, all the banksters are resigning. We have that posted on our website, conspiracycafe.com. Mass resignation of banksters. Watch out. One of the little addendums in there that just lights up. Nicaragua central bank president quit. President Daniel Ortega plans to use central bank reserves for the creation of a regional bank for a Venezuelan-led bloc of Latin American nations known as ALBA. Venezuela is willing to transfer 1% of its reserves, or about $300 million, to a bank. ALBA includes Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Ecuador, and Bolivia. It's to eliminate the dictatorship of the U.S. dollar or protect yourself from when the U.S. dollar fails. It's a virtual currency created by the ALBA bloc in 2009 for regional trade. I look at these people as very, very smart because they've created their own lifeboat. And I guess maybe it's just too much to go through, but you know, you just pick something. The Romanian Prime Minister and cabinet resign. Swiss bankers resign. China, India, Japan, Iran, United Kingdom, France, United Kingdom again and again. Spain, Japan, New Zealand, Greece, India, Iran, Vatican, India, Kuwait, Nicaragua, United Kingdom, World Bank, Slovenia, Kenya, Ghana, Saudi Arabia, Australia, USA, Pakistan, Russia, Switzerland, Korea. Those are the list of the banksters who have decided to take up knitting a sweater. And we have to wonder, why? I think we know what's on the horizon. Very much so. Then there was a big arrest in Italy about the billion-dollar bills. $6 trillion in counterfeit U.S. bonds. Phony billion-dollar bills. 8 people arrested under investigation for fraud because they have Federal Reserve notes backed in gold for enormous sums of money. And since this is one of the few shows where we've talked about these so-called sovereign accounts that are worth so much money. So this is the actual seal that came with this. Stuff was in this super briefcase that we'll get, or a case at the bottom here. So we look at all the paper that this guy's got. Like if each one of those is $1 billion, that's a lot of stuff. Federal Reserve System, Chicago, Mother Box Treaty of Versailles. Is that what we fought over in the war? These sovereign accounts that are worth trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in gold that was supposed to be stored with the Federal Reserve Board? But of course, if you say it's a fraud and you arrest the perpetrators of the fraud who hold these notes, well, the notes are just, probably burned ultimately and destroyed. And then what happens? Well, if those were really gold certificates for real gold, well, then somebody gets all that real gold. Well, the person who held the notes goes to prison. So were they real, or are they counterfeited pieces of the real thing? It's a very interesting little bit. Like I say, I can see that they counterfeited the paper, but the trunk looks very, very original. HSBC laundering billions. Former employees come forward to say that he's got 1,000 pages of documents to talk about how this bank has been laundering money pretty much all over the world. John Cruz, an account relationship manager, has released stories on this. And of course, Jerome Corsi has written about this. He's instigated a lawsuit to go after Obama for his natural born status. But that's like peeing in the wind. But he's also looking into this HSBC conundrum as well. And he gets into the fact that all these frauds are perpetrated, but they take people out, just like Donald Rumsfeld was talking about the $2.3 trillion in defense funds that had gone missing on September the 10th and crying on September the 10th and crying on September 11th. The fact that 125 employees in the Pentagon who are accountants, bookkeepers, and budget analysts died in the 9/11 attacks. And nobody ever bothered to waste their time looking for the $2.3 trillion because terrorists came out of nowhere and bit us. Good stuff. And the British are saying £500 for every British household to help bail out Greece. There is no chance that Greece is going to recover, but we have to bail them out, at least according to Euro MP Nigel Farage. And he's somebody that we'll put up on the screen and play a video about because he just goes quick to the chase. But as you go through this in fine detail, one of the things that they want from the Greeks, that nobody talks about, is they want them to modify their constitution. It doesn't say in the article what they want them to do with it, but when you're coming after your constitution, that's usually something that just means open warfare. And as General Smedley Butler said, that's one thing you do fight for, is your constitution, your Bill of Rights. Then they talk about the $100 billion euro public debt write-off, which they call the haircut, and the $130 billion euro loan that's been agreed to. So if we do the math, There was no haircut. It's just another $30 billion loan. You just take it out of one pocket, put it in another pocket. Because they asked these people in this article, when was the last time a country defaulted on his debt? Argentina, 2002. Because Greece technically hasn't defaulted. If you don't pay back half your loan, you're in default. But technically, the way the language is spoken and written, the contract signed, you haven't defaulted. So if they haven't defaulted, they haven't taken the haircut. It's a scam. It's a lie. It's a total bunch of BS. They haven't defaulted. There is no haircut. So in an article, How Greece Could Take Down Wall Street, which we'll have to get into, 50% of the Greek bond write-down was not declared an event or a default. They just make up the words. So let's see here. Let's try this one here first. You gotta love this guy.
Delay the Greek bailout until after elections in April. How much do you think Athens will be able to survive until then without some cash injection?
Well, I mean, the big day comes up in March when there is a major repayment. And I guess this new stance taken by the EU today is they'll make sure there's enough money to fulfill those short-term demands. But rather than committing to the whole package, what the EU is now doing, it's trying to influence the outcome of the Greek general election. Not satisfied with getting rid of the last democratically elected prime minister and putting in a puppet in the form of Mr. Papademos, it's now saying to the Greek people, unless you vote for the right parties, unless you vote for parties that are happy to be subjugated to EU control, we will not give you the rest of the money and you will go bankrupt. And this is the kind of blackmailing game that we're now seeing from the European Union. Is it any wonder, in the face of that, that much of Athens caught fire on Sunday night?
Now, Greece is already years into recession. It's frequently missed its fiscal targets. The bailouts don't seem to be working. What makes the EU, in your opinion, so committed to the austerity bailout strategy that they've got going?
Well, remember, for 5 years in a row now, the Greek economy has contracted, and we've just got the fourth quarter figures through from 2011, which show that that contraction is now accelerating and has actually reached now 7% per annum. So, you know, the economy is actually in a sort of downward deflationary death spiral. I had a meeting in November with Angela Merkel, and I said to her, look, surely, Chancellor, wouldn't it be better for Greece to leave the euro, to devalue, and to try and get some growth back into the economy? And wouldn't it be kinder on German taxpayers for them not to have to sign blank cheques in perpetuity? Why don't we let Greece go? And her response was very telling. She said, look, we cannot let Greece leave the euro, because if she does leave, there'll be other countries that want to leave too, and that will mean the end of the European project. So the reality here is that Greece, the country of Greece and its people, are to be put to the sword, sacrificed, if you like, at the European altar, all in the name of preserving the European project. And this is a project that these politicians have been working on for over half a century, and they don't, even though it's failing, they don't want to let it go.
Now, the rhetoric coming from German politicians shows Berlin may be losing patience with Greece, but the German parliament will also have to approve a second bailout. Do you think they're preparing for the public for a no vote?
I think that if you put it to a referendum in Germany, I think we know what the result would be. No, I suspect that despite the dissatisfaction that is felt by many German politicians, I think the German parliament, just as the Greek parliament did last Sunday, will continue to toe the line and continue to say that bailouts are the answer. And as far as I'm concerned, it's rather like saving the cancer and not saving the patient.
Now, Greek finance ministers have said some Eurozone states want Greece out of the monetary union and accuse them of playing with fire. How unified do you think are politicians in the union at this stage?
It's cracking. It's cracking. We saw one of the commissioners, EU commissioners, Nelly Cruz, said the other day that if Greece left, it wouldn't be a man overboard situation. So even at the top, there is now a crack beginning to appear. And very interestingly, what I've seen today in the European Parliament is from the Greens and from the left in politics, for the first time in years, we're hearing real criticism. And the socialist criticism is that these austerity cuts are damaging living standards to such an extent that they're now unacceptable. So I'm beginning, I'm not the lone voice anymore in this place saying that these policies are mad.
Now, Greece is not alone in this situation. We have a double-dip recession now in Portugal, Italy back in recession. Is the EU ready or even able at this point to be able to bail out all the states that are in dire straits? Briefly.
Well, I think the point about Greece is that this is the second bailout, of course, that we're talking about, but she only constitutes 3% in terms of size of the Eurozone economy. If we get to Italy, we get to one of the biggest countries in the Eurozone and in the European Union, and I don't think then we can print or invent enough money to bail out Italy. Italy is where this will all end.
All right, we have to leave it there. Nigel Farage, MEP, leader of the UK Independence Party, thanks for your insight.
Italy is where you're going to slice the pie. But there's a big reason, something a little broader, that wasn't around when I was a student in economics. It just makes Greece the end of the world scenario even as it sits. And this is in this article by Ellen Brown, How Greece Could Take Down Wall Street. There's $32 trillion in the credit default swaps. That's twice the U.S.'s GDP and more than twice its debt. The banks, especially banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, HSBC, and Goldman Sachs, have leveraged anywhere from 40 to 1 to 81, depending on whose figures you believe, on these countries' debts. To absorb a 3% loss would be overwhelming to them, never mind that Greece defaults. So they use an equation called the Black-Scholes equation. It's in an article, The Mathematical Equation That Caused the Banks to Crash. And if these bets on these credit default swaps go down, the whole house of cards comes down, completely and totally. And of course, well, the only thing we can have after that is going to be a good war to take our mind off the fact we're poor. Then, of course, Romano Prodi, former EU leader, president of the European Union in 2002, said candidly that they knew this when they built the European Union. It was built with this mechanism because as it comes apart, people will come back to get a solution to the crisis, which will hopefully, for them, involve finishing off the Euro project. You have to sell your soul to the man with the company store, and that's the European Union. And like this chap, so we have another little video to play. He's just priceless, in my opinion, at the European Parliament.
You picked the right man. Puppet Papademos is in place. And as Athens caught fire on Sunday night, he rather took my breath away. He said, violence and destruction have no place in a democratic country. What democratic country? He's not even a democratically elected Prime Minister. He's been appointed by you guys. And Greece isn't run through democracy now, it's run through a troika. 3 foreign officials that fly into Athens airport and tell the Greeks what they can and can't do. The violence and destruction that you saw on Sunday is being caused directly because people are having their democratic rights taken from them. What else can they do? And I must say, if I was a Greek citizen, I would have been out there joining those protests on Sunday. I'd be out there trying to bring down this monstrosity that has been put upon those people. And in his efforts, in the puppet's efforts to get the MPs to vote for the bailout package, he warned them that if they didn't do so, there would be a dramatic decline in living standards. Well, as he looked outside the front door, has he seen the fact that 50% of the young people are unemployed already? Has he seen the fact that the economy, far from stalling, has contracted for 5 years in a row and is now accelerating on a downward death spiral, a contraction of 7% per annum? Greece is being driven into the ground, and I think, frankly, when it comes to chaos, you ain't seen nothing yet. These policies are driving Greece towards a revolution. They need to be set free. If they don't get the drachma back, you will be responsible for something truly, truly horrible.
Das Wort hat für die
You gotta like that guy. probably one of the few politicians that talks some common sense, although getting the drachma back would probably be no benefit to Greece because, unfortunately, the loans are in euros and would have to be paid back in euros. A drachma would be a very, very useless currency for a good period of time until they get back on their feet and they have to pay back these loans. Give them their drachma back and make the loans payable in drachma, convert them. That might be a fair thing to do, but the New World Order doesn't do what's fair. It just does what it can get away with. The funny thing is, if we went to Greece and we talked about these things a few years ago, we would just be openly mocked and scoffed at. Maybe pretty much like we are doing what we do now. And that you have to face this. I looked at some of the press, you know, women jumping out of windows, people starving, giving away their children to strangers because they can't afford to feed them anymore. Because for a moment, you couldn't face an unpleasant truth. You couldn't face reality and deal with it and put it to bed. So because you can't face it, that only means one thing: you're going to have to live it. You're going to have to live through difficulties that will destroy the rest of your life because you haven't got the wherewithal to spend a few minutes to straighten it out. You never get the time back. Do it now. Stephen Harper is muzzling scientists in Canada. So of course I found a great image of the flat earth, because that's all we're allowed to have is whatever flat earth they dictate, by stifling science. Especially one of the articles he talked about where a woman has discovered the fact that there's some really bizarre virus in fish that we eat that could be catastrophic to fish stocks. That's important. It's got to get out. It's paid for by tax dollars, but see, they want to keep all this secret so that they can take advantage of it for financial gain. That's probably one of the big reasons. And then, of course, with the Flat Earth Society, what really happens, I like this because it looks like Quebec, it almost looks like the Rideau, is you just go off the end. And this is what we're doomed to, is to go off the end. Economically, I mentioned in the article that we're running in the communist system. The 10 planks of communism include central banks and income tax. We have to get out of that system, whether it be the social credit system by Douglas or the Islamic system of banking without interest. We have to make these changes or we will most assuredly be crushed and destroyed. But we're not allowed to think and talk like that in Stephen Harper's world, the Bilderberg world, the elite rich world. Bill Gates pays his share to get mainstream media, gives them great donations, so they speak well of him. And then we find out that he's heavily invested into some of the most demonic corporations going, like Monsanto, Cargill, and he extols the virtues of the poisons that go into our bodies and explores Antarctica to get his own way out. When you look at what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation give their money to, they own and control media. They don't send a thin dime here, let me assure you. But this Monsanto is an evil, evil, evil machination. It's probably one of the most dangerous things on the planet Earth. It's like 100,000 Al-Qaedas. Easily. So that's why I don't hesitate to have a blog to go, you know, hey Monsanto, are you Roundup ready? To round them up. And just use the terror laws to put them in Guantanamo, put them in stress positions, waterboard them, because they're poisoning all of us. In urine samples that have been done, everybody's got these building block poisons in their body. Monsanto denies everything, says it's all great, it's all wonderful. Drink the shit. That's what we'll give you to drink when you're in our little Guantanamo. If it's all so safe. I'll believe you. How can you deny a poison is a poison? Because that's basically what it is. So if anybody gets sick, they just deny that it has anything to do with their poison. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But they can afford to buy off the judges. Willie Nelson is getting together with 300,000 others to sue Monsanto in something called, you know, Occupy the Food System. If this organization is as staged as Occupy Wall Street, well, it's a complete waste of time. So 83 plaintiffs representing 300,000 organic farmers, organic growers, and organic seed businesses are going after them. It's one of the big things Monsanto does. If any of its seeds get into your farm, they sue you. Well, wait a minute. You come on my land, you're trespassing. Even if it's with your seeds, you're polluting my crop. Keep your garbage to yourself. So why did they ever allow Monsanto to introduce genetically engineered seeds into our pure, organic, and heirloom stockpiles across America in the first place, they say? Neophytes. But we just use one of those old Wicked Witch type of answers. The better to kill you with, my dearies. Because that's what they have in mind, to reduce the population stock. That's why this is being done. And if Bill Gates and Paul Allen have access to under the firmaments in Antarctica to the ultimate escape with their 100 submarines of the elite rich billionaires, they can leave us all on the surface to die. And maybe that's what they've been doing, is making negotiations possible to get out of Dodge and leave us behind. Hungary destroys all Monsanto GMO cornfields. Monsanto's infertility-linked Roundup found in all urine samples tested. All. And the chemical is called glyphosate. Study was done at a German university. It's in the groundwater. It's all over the place. Monsanto guilty. Paul Francois, French farmer, poisoned by biotech giants' chemicals. He was lucky he got it all in one dose. He can establish a cause and effect relationship. He'll probably win his case. The rest of the people do not, because you can't prove, at least to the courts, that you've had a long-term exposure and that's had a cause and effect relationship with your illnesses. But, that's where that Roundup is very, very handy, because at Guantanamo, they will talk, and those relationships can be established. This is a crime against humanity. It deserves the use of these great laws that they've invented to go after some poor Muslim guy and hold him in custody. Another article, People of the Lie, Cancer, is very, very important, because it talks about changing the pH level of your body, and that kills cancer. One of the ways you do it is with baking soda. It's the baking soda cure. Sometimes it's taken with honey. Cancer lives on sugar, baby, so cut that out of your diet. But as it comes into the honey to get the sugar, it meets the baking soda, and it's just the mousetrap. Kills it. Beautiful. We were following our ships that were carrying weapons in this blog we call Yacht Wars. The yacht Yogi sank in the Aegean Sea at this point here. The crosshairs on the weekend. It was well filmed, well photographed. I think we have something down here where this baby, they said it was gale force winds, heavy seas, knocked out the engine on the ship. Well, it ain't that bad. That's nothing that terrible. So that's a lie. The engine stopped, the stabilizers wouldn't work, it capsized. But of course, there's my map following the Fen Sky. The ship that rendezvoused with Global Star happens to be in the same place a couple days earlier. They block out a lot of these things on a regular basis, so we've saved a few. This is one that I saved. This is very close to where the Yogi foundered. Was the Yogi being used as his intelligence ops? A lot of these private yachts are. They always have been. Howard Hughes's yacht, the Southern Cross, was used in World War II. Probably revealed the position of the battleship Bismarck for its destruction. It was probably one of the best covert operations in World War II. Very little written about it or said about it. I don't doubt that that's not the same today. Fen Sky made a tour around Greece on the 14th of February. So it was all around the area. And then our good buddy Global Star changed its destination. It was supposed to go to the United Arab Emirates. It was supposed to go through the Suez Canal, and then all of a sudden we get a destination, Parama, Greece. Very nice of them. That's in this little green box down here at the bottom. That's where that port is. That port is very famous because that's where the ships to Gaza go. So if this ship was taking or smuggling weapons to get a false flag operation, this was a common place for the flotillas to go to Gaza. There's other sister ships to Fen Sky. One was called Blue Sky. They're all the same. They look exactly the same. They could be substituted very, very easily. And then a little sidebar article I found. There was a massive explosion there at the end of the year at a fish market. Swept under the rug. Authorities take the explosives, send them for analysis. Nothing said afterwards. So that pretty much tells us we got like a MI6 or CIA operation in the works here, that they handle explosives in this port. And maybe that's where the ship was supposed to go all the time, but they knew we were following it. So they feinted, pretending to go through the canal to the United Arab Emirates, when in reality they turned back into Greece and unloaded their stores there. Some massive caves in Parama too that go underground. That is a journey to the center of the earth, let me tell you. Would-be bomber in fake suicide vest tries to blow up Washington. So there we go, another sting. Moroccan board, Amin El Khalifi from Alexandria, Virginia, arrested. Another guy to bite the bullet and take the fake terror trick. You got to be a fool to be a patsy in these stings, but that's about the only people they ever arrest or come up with are the people that are the patsies. So you got to be like mega dumb, but it's not like there isn't a whole lot of them to do something like that. Of course, our show we brought up last week, the bungling bombers in Bangkok. Well, the media has corrected everything that we've brought up. So here's our so-called terrorists all cavorting with alleged hookers, smoking a hookah pipe, drinking, and breaking the tenets of Islam. Of course, they have them on surveillance video coming out of the house. Now, how would they know to put a surveillance camera in front of that house unless they were under observation in the first place? Just, you know, I'm sure not every house has it. And then, of course, they show a picture with the guy with his leg blown off just outside. And it's cool here, you got this little bit of graffiti carved into this, I don't know if it's a phone pole or a tree or whatever. They said his grenade hit a tree, came back at him. And you can just see how close everybody is to him. You see the backs of these heads. Even still, like, you know, if there's a weapon there, even if it's a hand grenade, you got a 50-meter kill radius, 50 meters. That in the tree or the post there, it says sick. Or something like that. Very, very keen. And then this guy's under interrogation by the police. I see something very wrong there, even in their corrected mode of photographs here. Is the guy's not black and blue. You're in Thailand. They're not going to be nice to you. They're going to be kicking the living crap out of you. So I would expect the guy to be marked up a little bit. This is the house that was blown up allegedly. I don't see the video cameras or where they were unless they're on this light pole here that they have all these wonderful clear pictures of these guys coming and going from the house. The guy from the bomb squad, this was a picture we showed before, but again, these people are just too close. If there was a real bomb or explosive, they're even too close for a hand grenade, never mind a larger explosive device. Here's him sifting through the rubble. Police car with some holes in the windscreen, suggesting that there was fragmentation from a grenade. Can we believe it? Is it true? Is it staged? Probably is a bit of a false flag operation. I don't doubt that for a minute. They're preparing for more and more false flag operations. The big one's going to be London, of course, for the Olympics. They did a major drill in London to prepare for this at an abandoned or unused tube station, Aldwych. And you see the police all lined up to go through the rituals of a subway bombing. Will they have another bombing like they did on 7/7? Nothing wrong with training or getting prepared, but we remember they were doing the training and getting prepared on 7/7. The private company just happened to be at all 4 locations that the bombers used. That's the mayor of London at that one. So we wait with bated breath to see what the Olympics will reveal. This last picture is very pertinent because it has the names of the various stops along the line. So it'd be very interesting to see if something does happen, that those are the dates they happen on, and that we went on our tour with the Google code, the Dickens tour of London. Do have a look. And just to show you how despicable they are, this was sent to me. See if we can get this going on a larger mode. Good. This is the Olympics in Beijing in 2008. Hopefully we get it up in a reasonable period of time here. maybe what we'll do is switch to me, Aaron, until it starts going, and then it goes. We can always go back. Saudi Arabian millionaire with links to 9/11 terror attacks, living in luxury in London, home while working for a state oil company. Saudi Arabian accused of having links to some of the 9/11 terrorists, living in London in luxury. Abdulaziz Al-Hiji, 38, works for the European branch of Saudi Aramco, has a posh London home. He lived in Florida in a U.S. home there. It was one of those gated communities in Sarasota. 3 of the terrorists visited him at his home, including Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shahi. Al-Shahi is allegedly flew Flight 175 into the South Tower. Ziad Jarrah, who crashed United Airlines Flight 93 in a Pennsylvania field, was also thought to have visited. He learned to fly at the Venice airport, 20 miles from the house at 4224 Escondido Circle. And you just have to wonder, how does this guy get to go all over the world? Know these guys, have been in contact with these guys, visit these guys, and just be ignored. Bob Graham, who chaired the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee, said he has seen 2 secret documents that cast doubt on the FBI's claim that this guy had nothing to do with 9/11. So we're being lied to by the FBI. He's just didn't go straight to England either, like he got out of Dodge. He moved to Saudi Arabia first, because I guess he didn't have to worry about extradition treaties. And then we brought up in shows past about how editors of newspapers' wives in Florida were renting apartments to these guys. They were close to the Venice airport. The photographer for the newspaper was killed in the anthrax attacks because he had photographic documentary evidence of all this. It's an open and shut case, except for one small problem. They control corporate mainstream media. They control law enforcement. They control a lot of our politicians. And for some strange reason, this is a massive coordinated attack on your mind. World Health Organization delays hugely significant decision on whether to publish the details of the lethal man-made flu. So that's still up in the air. And you know damn well, when they give permission to publish, this monster will be unleashed among us. Top secret papers about multi-million-pound British deal to develop drones with France are stolen from a Paris train. Of course, that's drones between England and France. So a guy working for the French firm of Dassault Aviation was waiting for the train. There was a diversion. His briefcase was stolen. They're making medium long-range endurance drones for reconnaissance. It would be available by 2020 and a combat version ready for 2030. Are these drones to spy on us? U.S. military's coming up with a DARPA project called Avatar, where they'll have soldiers control robot surrogates, just like in the movie Avatar. That's some of the things being done with your tax dollars. The FBI purges hundreds of terrorism documents from Islamophobia probe. So seemingly they were teaching a lot of bullshit and propaganda to agents, or making it available to agents. Not that we're surprised in any way, shape, or form. It's just the way they work. The people of the lie. Well, maybe we won't be getting that video. It would be quite the shame, really, because it's quite prolific. It just shows an exact simulation of the bombing on 7/7 at the Olympics. They have a bus. It opens up. They have like a ceremony, a satanic ceremony. This is a bridge been blown up in the United States. So I'm wondering if they're testing, instead of doing it in England where we might be suspicious, they're blowing up that bridge along the Ohio River. The Fort Steuben Bridge, 83 years old. 153 pounds of explosives takes it down. Or is this just a practice run for what they're going to do across the Thames when they blow a bridge there and blame it on some Islamic group of one sort or another? Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. They're very good at that. Then, of course, there was the bombing and shelling in Homs, Syria. This journalist, Mary Colvin, was killed in the bombing. She was reporting live about the atrocities, children being killed. It takes a very, very brave person to go into a war zone and be shelled, shot at. She was shot in the eye previously. That's why she wears the eye patch. It's not because she watched Conspiracy Cafe and was prepared for the nukes. This is her French photographer assistant, Remy. He was killed as well. They were both in the same place. That's when they were in Libya earlier for the previous war. She's been in war zones all over the place. So they say it's just shocking what's going on there. The shelling, these people have no food, no medicine. Veterinarians are operating on people. They've gone to great pains to destroy the water supply. That's why it's very important to have food, water set up. That's her business card that they could hold up to prove, they got her. It's not an easy life being in something like that. But the downside is the phone systems are out. First person turned on a cell phone got shelled. So you try to communicate out, you're finished. And that's something I said when they got Gaddafi, that I thought it was a load of bunk, because anybody turned on a phone anywhere, they're going to pick it up and they're going to blow you away. And the man with the golden gun was probably a fake. So this is what we have to deal with. No supplies going in. You live in an area like that. In my local community, they got a warning out, 7 days, be prepared, have supplies. Make sure you got fuel, food, something to be prepared for. You just don't know. It can happen tomorrow. The power of unintended consequences. The karma wave. The karma wave struck deep. Son of Dutch monarch Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands fights for his life after suffering serious injuries in an avalanche. So of course they have lots of snow in Europe. It's terribly cold. People are dying hand over foot over there. Of course he lives the good life. And why do I say this is the karma wave? We mentioned on shows past about the Gulf oil disaster and how the Gulf Stream was affected. It's not going to Europe. They broke it. That's why they're suffering from enormous cold. That's why we have a very mild winter here. We're feeling the effects of the Gulf Stream. It's going to snow tonight for tomorrow here, but there's no snow on the ground. It's near the end of February. I've never seen that in this part of Canada. Even my home much further up north, I could call it the glacier. The glacier comes in November. It doesn't leave till April. I can see my grass in spots. There's hardly been any snow, even in the snow belt. So I look at this as Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands. She owns Royal Dutch Shell. Royal Dutch Shell is heavily invested in all these oil fields too. They're part of the grand oil conspiracy. And this is the karma wave. Yes, you got away with it. And your son got toasted in an avalanche. Rupert Murdoch wants his people back to work. I think you know how I feel about that despot and what he's really up to. Been in communication with Dr. Carly. She's starting a new radio show in the UK. And I think we're going to touch base on becoming a guest on that show and breaking it to a British audience about what's really been going on with these pricks. And maybe getting some justice. Lucien Freud died, so maybe that was a step in the right direction, because he was the guy who had the villa in Praia de Luz, Portugal. There's also a report about the love child that Hitler may have had with a French woman. That's quite interesting. I'm sure there were probably more. The big thing about this article wasn't this chap who passed away, Jean-Marie Lauré, but they also said in this article that Hitler also had a love child with Unity Mitford. Unity Mitford was like a groupie who followed him relentlessly. Killed herself when the war started. Maybe they killed her and then took the baby away for whatever reason. If that's the case, that's something to really be sweating about. Then, of course, our Soylent Green is ready. Scientists have grown lab-grown meat, the first artificial hamburger. Professor Mark Post, Maastricht University, Netherlands, has grown pieces of muscle 2 centimeters by 1 centimeter, about a millimeter thick. It represents calamari in appearance. 200,000 pounds for the hamburger. That's British pounds. The Soylent Green is on the way. Of course, it may be coming with unhealthy levels of antibiotics and antifungal chemicals to stop the synthetic meat from rotting. Yum, yum. Ancient seeds in Siberia, 30,000-year-old seeds have come to life with a little bit of extra treatment. So maybe there is some hope for the world. Another little piece of hope for the world is The Lancet, the British medical journal, has said grief is not a mental illness that should be treated with pills. Grief is not a mental illness that should be treated with pills, because virtually everything else, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders says in their new book for 2013, DSM-5, everything's a mental illness that has to be treated with pills. So someone has finally stood up and said, no, not just no, but hell no. And that's something we do here on Conspiracy Cafe. We say no. No to the globalists, no to the banksters, no to everything else, no to war, no to the bullshit, no, no, no. And one thing we would ask you to say yes to is help us with our little mission, to figure things out, to look at Neuschwabenland, to look at the elite rich, to try to figure out what they're doing and what they're leaving behind, because it answers a lot of questions. They're not going to destroy the earth to destroy themselves. They found a way to get out of Dodge, and I think that's what they've been doing, or preparing to do. Just carrying on base 211 like the Nazis did. Either they have the base, they're controlling the base, or they're building another one, but they appear to have a way out of Dodge. And they'll just leave the rest of us up here to rot, if they can get away with it. So whether they destroy the economy or the environment or anything else, they just don't care. But we have to care, because it's our lives. We're left behind. You want to live like they're doing in Greece? You want to be demoted to third world status? You want to live in a nuclear nightmare after somebody unleashes some weapon somehow, some way? No, you don't. Fight back. Fight back. It's an info war. Fight for the cyberspace war 1. Screw their copyrights. Wind up the Gutenberg press. Spit it out. Because it's little forums like this that do it. And any help you can give us, we'd appreciate it very, very much. You know how to do it? You can hit the PayPal button or mail something here that's cashable in Canada. Send it to the office here at that channel, and we'll look after it. And if you can't help but send a U.S. postal money order, leave it blank so I can have my American friends take it across the border and cash it in, because it's the only way we can change the paradigm. Knowledge is power. You have it, you're just as powerful as they are, and we can take them off the tracks. That's why we come here. This is why it's Conspiracy Cafe. This is why it's that channel, and this is why it's Toronto. We're sorry we didn't have a live broadcast. We're sorry we had to record it, but it'll still be there for you when you get to see it. So thanks for coming out. We'll be back again next week. Maybe live streaming, maybe not, but we'll still be back, and we'll have a show for you as soon as we can get it out for you. Thanks for coming out. Good night.